Hey, what's going on, good people? It's your boy James Harris, founder of Mental Health, author of Man Just Express Himself. Listen, I just want to tell you guys thank you so much for the love that you continue to show me on the movement, the book, and of course now this new YouTube channel. You guys definitely did your thing with liking, sharing, subscribing. Make sure you continue to do that. I definitely appreciate you. I didn't anticipate it to grow as rapidly as it did, but we are here. So with that being said, I will be introducing a new segment that I'll be interviewing different men throughout the community as well as in different places. And I wanted to do this so you guys can not only just hear my voice and the lessons that I provide for you guys on different knowledge and subject, but I thought it would be an interesting way for other men to tell their story of resilience and their road to their wellness journey. So we're going to be talking in these interviews about mental health, physical health, relationships, substance use recovery, early detection, different societal norms, relationships, athletes and mental health, maybe politics and mental health, and the stressors that's coming from that. And also masculinity, we might dive into that as well. So it's so many amazing men who have reached out that are open to tell their story. So, I'm going to put something together, man. One Tuesday out of the month. I think it'll be interesting for you guys to hear that dynamic. So be willing and open to listen. I hope you guys continue to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you do that. Make sure you also get the book, go support. With that being said, the guest that I got coming up is...
Name is Josh Odam. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm the founder and curator of Healing While Black LLC. Healing While Black is an online platform dedicated to the mental health and wellness of Black, queer, trans, and non-conforming people. I'm a certified trauma-informed life coach, accepting clients. And I do a lot of the work. A lot of the work that I do is in regards to anti-racism, anti-oppression, queer and trans antagonism, and also rooting that in mental health. I'm pursuing my master's of social work, and we actually got in contact through we were doing the Sunday Survivor series together back in the summertime with Jewel. So it's glad we've been trying to coordinate for a minute ago, brother. And that's on me. I'm gonna take that, but I'm glad we got together, man.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, I've been making my rounds, connecting in different spaces, and I've been fortunate enough that my platform has grown the way it's grown. So I'm doing my due diligence and bringing in other curators and other people with voices to shed light on different things. And one of those things happened to be, of course, queer, LGBTQ plus. And I feel, as part of my obligation and my duty as not only a clinician, a therapist, but heterosexual Black man to be a voice for that population as well. So if you could, I know it's not your job to educate people, but however, I definitely want people to get educated as much as they can on this space in particular, because it's still taboo, especially in the African American community, especially with men, in different settings. And of course, we know the trans community is getting killed left and right, unfortunately. So if you can, man, just share light, basic information starting from the top, of what it is to be queer, what it is, the pronouns, inclusive language. I know I personally use inclusive language in my dialect day to day. I say partner, although I
Yeah.
got, a beautiful fiance.
Mm-hmm.
She's a woman, but I
Mm-hmm.
still say partner just for
Yeah.
inclusiveness. My daughter, neutral gender name, her name is Peyton.
Mm-hmm.
She's 8 years old. So for me, I just think it's important that we all adapt certain levels of inclusiveness
Right.
because, that population, man, is still getting disvoided, in certain settings. So if you could, man, just share some light on what it is.
Yeah. So just trying to touch on everything you just said. So just for folks who, because I identify as a queer man, a Black queer man, and just also starting off there, that queer is a reclaimed slur, right? And it has been reclaimed starting in the late 70s, early 80s. That process through ways of scholarship, queer studies, queer theory, all these different things have led to the reclaiming of the Q and LGBTQIA plus, and that Q can mean queer or questioning. And but I wanted to just make that point first and foremost. So just for folks who are engaging with this topic, in that it is your responsibility to ask folks how they would like to identify as, because just because I use the term queer, I know a lot of my older family members, my older siblings, my elders who are of the LGBTQ plus community, they resent that word with a passion, because that was used against them, that was used to dehumanize and ostracize and vilify. And in many cases, it still is. So just to make that distinction, there's a nuance to queering, and there's a nuance to the word queer that has to be be respected and acknowledged. And just because I'm using it does not mean every person in the LGBTQ community is comfortable with that. So just wanted to make that point. But again, just very basic LGBTQIA plus stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, intersex, not or asexual. All of these things can be found in the plus, because there are more acronyms or more letters that fall under that acronym. As I remember watching Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones, and he was referring to us as the alphabet people, because we just kind of cordoned off a section of the alphabet. But that is, again, a topic conversation, that there is an umbrella, but these things cannot be conflated. So going to the point about what you said in regards to making a differentiation between gender and sexuality, and you were making the point about Black trans women being killed at near epidemic rates. For those of y'all who do not know, last year was the deadliest year on record for Black trans women, and this year does not look any better. And also understanding that there's a real trans misogyny about that, which allows for violence against Black trans women especially to take place and it not be checked. We have to then be very intentional about that, and also understanding that we have conversations and work that we need to do within our community, within the LGBTQ community, within the queer community, about internalized transphobia as well. So, and that's a us conversation. We're gonna handle that. Yeah, you handle that on the side of the cisgender heterosexual brothers, but we have to handle that stuff too. And also to the point, I want to try to get to everything that you said, even to the point of using inclusive language, right? So a lot of us grew up saying "you guys," right, and understanding the inherent sexism in that, because not all of us identify as guys, as men, as masculine people. So saying partner, saying y'all, saying fam, instead of saying hey bro, hey famo, like trying to get out of that language and use things that do affirm all folks' identities, because just because someone quote unquote looks masculine, you cannot then affirm or assume someone's gender identity just by looking at them. That's why we ask for pronouns, because you don't know. I could use they them pronouns and you wouldn't know by looking at me. I'm a big dude, and identify as a man, but even if I was, say, transitioning or moving in ways that I feel more affirm my gender identity, you wouldn't know that by looking at me. And that's why pronouns are incredibly important. That's why using inclusive language is incredibly important. And I do encourage everyone to do their due diligence and research and do all these different things, because, again, as you said, it is not on the marginalized to educate those who have more privileged identities. And so there are great resources out there. There are great places to go and find trainings, find the introductory lessons about gender and sexuality, kind of like a 101. I would strongly encourage folks to visit Baldwin Second Gen, the Sylvia Rivera Law Project. All of these organizations are led and run by Black, queer, trans, and non-conforming people, and they're putting out work that does not erase their Black identity or their Indigenous identity, while also affirming their queer and trans identity. So just to give that, I know it's a huge overview, but trying to touch on everything that you said, bro. But I appreciate the question.
No, definitely, man. Thanks. So I was definitely used to saying guys a lot, because to me it was inclusive because girls can be guys, so I didn't think about it. But now I say, good people. What's up, good people? Like, that's how I introduce all my videos. So in respect to that. And I learned that when I was on this setting, it probably was the Sunday series when Jules said, or somebody said, hey, don't say guys because it's not, So after that, there's no debate. All right, cool. Like, I don't want to offend nobody. I'm learning too. So for me, I just thought refrain from using that just in case somebody was to be offended. So within the community, though, like growing up, like taboo, homosexuality, queerness, lesbian, gays, like all of that was definitely like taboo, and there's so many people still afraid to have those conversations with family members. So any insight or encouragement or ways that one can do that? Because of course we want people to be who they are, but we say that, and then this young man or this young woman come out and say, hey, I like the same sex, and parents or peers get upset and mad. Like, so how do we lessen that burden or lend more support?
Well, so two things. So I think there, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, but I do feel like we ought to be very clear and explicit in that we have had a lot of conversations within, the Black community, right, amongst Black folks, and that was somehow taken to the place of Black people are somehow more homophobic or transphobic than the general population, than white people, and that's not true at all. That's also a very violent and dangerous myth. We are not more or less homophobic than any population. We have work to do, right? Not to say that at all, but to say that we are somehow our brand of homophobia is more intense. That is a dangerous anti-Black myth. So I always like to start off the conversation there. So then having these really difficult conversations of, well, what do we need to do, right? What do heterosexual folks need to do in order to fully create those spaces in which their loved ones, in which their children, in which their nieces, nephews, whomever, their people who they care for are affirmed. And the main point right there is you need to check your fucking self. Sorry, I don't mean to curse, but you know what I mean? But like, that is not, it should not take your child coming out to you as queer or saying that I'm transitioning, I want to transition, for you to begin to respect queer and trans people, right? It shouldn't take, and just as it should not take men having a daughter for men to start respecting women, right? So it really puts a dangerous onus on the children of homophobic or transphobic parents to open their hearts, because again, if that's something that you were doing before you had me or before you understood this part of my identity, then I can only imagine what you were doing before I even came into existence or before you even knew that this was a part of my identity. So the conversation is, where did you learn this? Where did you adopt this language that it's okay to throw around the word faggot and mean it in a term of jest or endearment? Where do we pick up that terminology? Where do we pick up these things? And then we have to start talking about, this is a part of decolonization. This is a part of really shedding these oppressive systems, which are all part of this white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal system that we live in. But nonetheless, we are still operating in this, and we are actively causing harm to people that we claim to love and care for. Because my thing is, even if this person did not tell you, that does not mean that they don't hear you. When you say these things, when you make these derogatory statements toward queer, trans, and non-conforming people, when you look at trans women with indifference, and when you say these disgusting homophobic and transphobic things, they're listening to this. They're seeing this. And of course, you know this as you are raising a child, raising someone who you want to be a conscientious, inclusive, liberatory-minded young person. You understand that she's watching daddy, right? And whatever daddy is doing, that is going to be a mirror. And that's going to be something that she is going to, I'm sorry, I don't know your child's pronouns. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to assume nothing.
No, you good.
Sorry, just as we talking. You know what I mean? Just as we talking, right? Like, it takes work and it takes effort. But if you're claiming to be a part of this this movement is going to take that consistent unlearning to make sure you check yourself. Like, oh, I don't know your daughter's pronouns, right? And I'm assuming that because I just assume that your girl goes by she, her pronouns, but that's, again, my own thing that I'm assuming that we need to be asking instead of assuming. And those assumptions are coming from a place of privilege, and that those privileged identities that we hold grant us power and grant us safety that other marginalized identities don't have. So this is a part of that work in regards to checking our own self and also making hard boundaries, right? I've had to make serious boundaries as to where and whom I let into my life if they're not going to commit to doing the work of shedding themselves of their, homophobic or transphobic or at least in terms of the conversation, their beliefs and their terminology, and not to dispose of people, but to say that, no, like, I'm queer. I have friends that are queer. I have folks that I love that are queer, and I don't want you around if that means you being around is going to cause me or them harm. So until you do what you need to do, here are some resources that you can do to check yourself. But if you're not going to do so, you can't sit with me right now, right? Not forever, but not for right now. We need to be able to make those, we need to be more comfortable, or we need to be more committed in making those hard stances, because that is where that growth happens. And you're going to see who's committed to doing the work, and you're going to see who's committed to their misunderstanding and committed to the kinds of privileges and powers that those identities bestow upon them.
Definitely. You definitely shed light on a lot of things. And my comment earlier wasn't a place of offense. It was a place of proximity. So,
Absolutely.
you know,
Right.
I'm around only Black people. So I hear
Yeah.
when Black people say, oh, you know, they were closeted and all that stuff, and how we grew
Right.
up. So I definitely understand that other ethnicities have probably the same tendencies. But for me, it's more proximity based. So
Absolutely.
listen, so if you can educate people, if you have this knowledge or resource for, because oftentimes, like growing up or in different settings, you hear somebody say, I was born this way, and people will negate that fact, like, no, you wasn't born that way. You know, and a lot of people don't know that gender is assigned based on the visual, and that, you know, like, it's so many different things that goes into it. So
Right.
if you can just educate, I guess, with resources that you have and knowledge that you have already.
Yeah. So to that point, saying that I was born this way, and realizing that there are so many things that people use to try to negate that theory, but no one ever asks or questions a heterosexual child, well, are you sure you were born this way? That is never weaponized toward them, because heterosexuality is the assumed default. So anything else is a deviation. So you can't be born that way. There was some kind of interrupting or some kind of interfering which led you astray, quote unquote. But that's never used or directed toward heterosexual children. Like, hey, like, Pop, I'm heterosexual. No, you're not. You weren't born that way. Just that same kind of ridiculous line of questioning, and that's never directed inversely. You know what I'm saying? And to your point about sex assigned at birth versus in sex and gender, in having that conversation about, yes, when I was born, the doctor who was there at the time of my birth looked at me, looked at my genitalia, and said, "It's a boy, right? Josh is a boy. Josh is a male." And I ascribe and I identify with that trait. So yes, that's the conversation. But then what happens when folks do not identify with the sex assigned at birth? And again, as you said, that was somebody making a determination about their gender identity based on their genitalia. And understanding, we don't have time to go into the depths of gender, but understanding that is, again, a very superficial reading of gender, and having these conversations about what this means to really decolonize gender, science, bodies, body politics. All those things have to be interrogated and also pressed. What's the word I'm looking for? We have to put that in conversation and in direct correlation with whiteness, right? Because if we're not having these conversations, what are we talking about? Because we're still Black, and what we're talking about, how do we deviate from these things? All of these things stem from that same rooted place of white supremacy and patriarchy. So I do encourage a lot of folks to do that great work. And I want to just give a quick resource. So there's a great one at UC Davis. It's the LGBTQIA Resource Center. It's at the University of California, Davis, and it's literally lgbtqia.ucdavis.edu. And it is literally a breakdown of this conversation and having these terms defined for people, and that way they can get into the conversation. So gender identity and sexual orientation, we're talking about the difference between transgender and intersex, because those are not the same thing. And we oftentimes conflate them, and really goes into a deeper conversation for folks to educate themselves. Now, mind you, that is not the totality of the work, but it's something to say that I want to do this work. I want to start here. And that way we can go forward and then build upon that common floor.
Appreciate that. Can you talk a little bit about male to female and female to male when it does come to transgender? Because I think a lot of people are, not informed on that as well. So they tend to still treat that person like that, like they think they should be identified as, opposed to what this person is now trying to identify themselves as, or what they are identified as, or what they are, innately. So if you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. So again, I think it's important for me to also name that while I'm queer, I'm not trans, and I can't speak to all those experiences, but I will say that even the terminology of the FTM and MTF, male to female, female to male, those are becoming outdated terminologies. And even the terms, even to use more outdated language, we are moving away from the conversation of sex changes or reassignment surgeries, more so of these are affirming surgeries or gender affirming surgeries, rather to say that you are changing or this is something that is happening to you. Of course, folks are transitioning, there's a change going on, but rooting that language and say like, no, I am doing something that is a huge step. It takes a lot of support and is affirming my gender identity, rather than saying you're having a sex change or all these different things that are really like moving out of place in our everyday vernacular, especially in these conversations. And to your point, that, and I really do appreciate this resource, because there is a large conversation around, do trans people need to have surgery or take hormones in order to quote unquote be trans? And the answer is absolutely not. Someone does not have to transition via hormones, via surgery, to be fully trans or 100% trans. That is not true at all. So I really would encourage folks who have that kind of thinking to, again, examine and ask yourself, well, why do I need these validating things to affirm this person in their identity, even if they just told me I would like to be addressed and affirmed as such? Why am I asking for so much from this person that has no obligation to provide this to me? And what am I not saying? What am I not doing? What am I not reading that makes this so difficult for me to just accept?
Definitely appreciate that. This right here might be too personal or too hard. So you can answer it or you can deflect or you can not answer it. But I just want to know, because it is a nice portion of people that are saying you're only queer because of trauma that happened to you. What do you say to that response?
That's also a really dangerous and violent myth. And just to your point, right? It's so violent on a lot of different ways, right? Because it says that you're only, because if I'm assuming what you're saying, like the conversation is that you are queer because you were sexually assaulted or you were raped as a child, right? And also let's just break down how terrible that kind of conversation is. Because first of all, it does nothing to affirm the fact that even if this child is queer or trans or non-conforming, and this adult is, or the child that grows into an adult, and they disclose to you, then you're not only invalidating their identity, but you're also invalidating what happened to them. And you are just, to me, you are proving yourself to be unsafe in so many different ways. And I truly pray and hope that we rid ourselves completely of that narrative. But again, there is no, at least I've not come across any empirical research that is peer reviewed, that has gone through any kind of tested, tried body institution that claims to be about psychology or psychiatry or gender studies or anything of the sort. There has not been any research that supports that kind of a claim. Now, I think this conversation can shift to, yes, if you were violated, if you were harmed sexually as a child, there are so many other things that we should be diverting attention to, right? How are you able to engage with your own body? Do you have a relationship with yourself that is healthy? And actually, I don't even want to say that. Let me not even go there. What I will say is, do you have the support that you need in regards of your own healing, right? Do you have what you need in regards to forming relationships with healthy attachment styles? Do you have what you need in regards to trusting people, trusting the persons who share the identity of those who did harm you, who did abuse you, right? Those are conversations that I feel are more necessary and needed instead of, well, trying to find a way to invalidate somebody's sexual or gender identity, you know. And it's and it is a lot, right? Because I've been asked the same thing, that, well, you know, like, did somebody touch you as a child, and this, that, and the third, and having to have that question, having to have that conversation with somebody is first of all incredibly uncomfortable, to put it mildly, but also speaks to a lot of things. Like, you only care about, at least for my ready, you only care about me experiencing the sexual trauma when it affirms your idea that heterosexuality is the norm, which is really fucked up. You know what I mean? And I'm hoping that these conversations about this have taken a turn. I see it in my circles, but clearly there's more work to be done. But again, I have not come across any research from any accredited body institution that puts forth that kind of a claim. Most have been debunked and shunned by the communities, intellectual and academic communities. And I'm just hoping that we just stop that, because, you know, it's just proving that you care less. You do not care about your people in the community that are queer or trans or non-conforming, and you care even less about survivors of sexual assault and rape. And if we're going to have these conversations, we need to be 100% real about it, in that there are higher likelihoods, not to place the community in a monolith, but there are higher instances of sexual violence directed toward Black folks who are queer and trans and non-conforming, and those instances are not reported to law enforcement. And not to say that law enforcement is the answer, but we can have a really pointed conversation about the intersections of queerness and trans identities and sexual violence that actually are diverted toward stopping the problem instead of trying to invalidate that. So I know I said a lot there, but that's the sore spot for me, and I wanted to just try to take it where I could.
No, appreciate that. You definitely hit on the ladder, and I'm sure people are educated in that sense. Another one that might be a sore spot is it's a portion of people too that still weaponize religion, to be honest with you, and say, God don't like this, he didn't make you this way, or whatever the case is. What's another way of educating those folks? You know, most of those folks too, to be honest with you, are rooted in that, the church hierarchy and don't believe that it can be a form of oppression and patriarchy as well. So they still believe like it's one type of person, how a person should be. So what do you feel surrounding that?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I am not a theologian, and I'm not a biblical scholar by any means, but I'm pretty sure that the Bible says you shouldn't be cheating on your wife. A lot of folks do, right? The Bible says a lot of things that a lot of folks do. And this is the line in the sand that they make this hard declaration on. You're definitely going to hell for this, even though I just stole from my partner, I cheated on my wife, I did all these different things, I dishonored my children, I am not living according to the gospel in so many different ways, but I myself I make myself the sole arbitrator for your life after death. And I've been fortunate enough doing this work to know a lot and work with a lot of pastors, a lot of preachers, a lot of people of the cloth and of the faith community who are Christians, who are Baptists, who are Pentecostal, who are throughout denominations, who are queer affirming, who are trans affirming, who use the word, who use the gospel to talk about what is happening and how we need to intervene and do more to stand up and advocate against ills in society, including but not limited to the killings of Black trans women, right? So this is not to say that there are not folks in the Judeo-Christian community who do this work, because I've met some of them. There are, but there are also a lot of folks that don't. And that needs to be called out as well.
Hey, on a lighter note, let's talk about healing, man. What is healing while
Yes.
Black? Let's talk about that.
Healing while Black is a concept. It is a work. It is an effort. I actually made. I came up with the idea back when I was an undergrad. I was not in a great place mentally. I was not doing well in school. Just feeling very defeated, very low, and I was literally. I wasn't about to graduate, and I was just spending my time in the craft center making T-shirts, and realized that this was a healing aspect for me. And then, through time, through work, through therapy, through doing the things that I wanted to do that brought me joy, I was able to get to better spaces. And I then changed the name around April of 2019 to Healing While Black, because Healing While Black is a daily process. As you know as well as I, healing ain't all bubble baths and self-care days. It's hard work. It's inner child work. It's shadow work. It's confronting the times in which you have self-sabotaged, right? And it's confronting the things that we were running from and trying to outwork or run from or out accomplish, and doing all these different things. But in the process, knowing that I've been able to come to a resolve for myself to say that I deserve nice things because I'm me, period, full stop. And I was not able to say that a year ago or 2 years ago, right? I felt that my worth was intrinsically tied to what I produced, and that is directly tied to capitalism. And that is not something, of course, there are days in which I falter and I stumble and I try to work myself to, halfway to death. But knowing now that a part of this big healing process was to say and to believe that, no, I deserve nice things. I deserve goodness. I deserve safety. I deserve peace. I deserve love. I deserve care, intentionality, all these things. And I don't have to labor for those things. And at least in this phase of my healing journey, that was the biggest takeaway I have.
Hey, that's it. I don't even want you to go into it no more, because I want people to leave this conversation and then go and research you and get on board with your movement. So,
I appreciate
hey,
you.
Nah, man. I mean, like I said, I just want to open up the doors for everybody. I got a little platform, so I want to ensure that I can reach as many people as I can, and people get educated on different topics. So with that being said, drop your information so people can get in contact with you. Let us know if you got anything else coming up. And those resources that you drop throughout the segment, I would definitely get those and put them in, so people can gain that insight. But I definitely appreciate you coming on. So, let them know how they can get in contact with you. Any last words, anything you got coming up?
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, good brother. We got to get on live real soon, man. Yeah, y'all can find me on Instagram at Healing While Black. I'm on Twitter at Healing While Black, but the Black is spelled BLK on Twitter, and it's spelled all the way through on Instagram. I am still taking clients. I am a certified life coach. If folks would like to have a consultation, I offer free consultations, just beginning to expand that aspect of my work as well. Please, if you know a brother that knows a brother who would love to come to the Sunday Survivor Series, it is free and accessible and exclusively for Black people. I help to facilitate the Brothers Healing Brothers group. It's open to Black men of all experiences, transgender, cisgender, heterosexual, queer, non-binary. If you identify as a Black brother, you are welcome. You can come through. It is free. It is available, and it is on Sundays. You can follow the SIB, the FAM, the Immaculate Jewel, the Gem to learn more. It's happening every other Sunday. So please come through if you want to be a part of that. If you know somebody who wants to be a part of that.